Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and once again, I'm here in the command center of SCU, flying solo in my cockpit here without my colleague, Mr. Brian E. Roach, who I hope to have back shortly. But once again, I got a pretty long-winded opinion that going solo isn't going to be so bad. But I do want Brian to come in and chime in on some of this, because the topic I don't want to talk about and haven't wanted to talk about is the one I'm going to talk about today, and that's quarterbacks. And it's most specifically because, in a way, it's timely, and in another way, it's just been annoying the hell out of me. And by that, I just mean everybody's looking for the next Ben Roethlisberger. And boy, that's an interesting topic right of itself. The way Ben sent off and everything like that, when's he going to officially retire? If he does a post-June 1st type designation, the Steelers save some extra cap room and things like that. But still nothing really official, but it would be very difficult to see him coming back, right? One of the all-time greats, not just for the Steelers, but in the NFL, and his numbers are everywhere, and among those greats. And it's kind of interesting because now Tom Brady is discussing whether or not he's going to return, and people were talking about whether or not they would put Ben and Brady in the same class. Wow, that would be great, but don't forget, especially the Hall of Fame ceremony, it's entertainment, it's showbiz. You're going to put both of those guys are both headliners. You're going to put them both in the same class, and if you don't, you're going to snub Ben. And then you're snubbing everyone. But you see a lot of these terrible towels in Canton. Not too far away from Pittsburgh. You saw it with Jerome Bettis. Saw it with the, oh my goodness, 5 guys going in like at the same time, basically because they hodgepodged the postponed 2020 class and put it in with the 2021s. Troy Polamalu, Bill Cowher, etc. It's an invasion of the terrible towel and the Pittsburgh Steelers fans in Canton. So don't forget, sometimes they're pushing tickets and everything like that. Could they put them both in at the same time? I say absolutely, they deserve to. Will they though? Boy, that's a whole other question, isn't it? So anyways, on the heels of that, everyone's looking for the next Ben Roethlisberger. There isn't going to be a next Ben Roethlisberger. There is not another Michael Jordan, for example. And there's a lot of Michael Jordan analogies that are floating around out there because of Aaron Rodgers and his talk about the last dance and this and that. And that's the aspect of the quarterbacks I want to speak of for this show, mainly because anything that's going to happen with a veteran quarterback, Mike Tomlin has spoken on this already. He's on record saying that he wants a veteran quarterback, right? That could very well mean the guys that he's already got in the stable. Now, one of those is for sure Mason Rudolph, signed for this upcoming season. Dwayne Haskins, tender placed on him, exclusive rights free agent, probably isn't going anywhere for all intents and purposes. Those 2 guys should be there and maybe compete for a starting job. They're both veterans. They both have NFL starts. Almost identical, to be completely honest. And when you think about it, it's kind of interesting because, I don't want to get into the NFL draft because, for one reason, I don't necessarily believe that the Steelers will draft a quarterback. Now, you might twist my arm like all of you did last year, where I was anti-running back in the first round up until the weeks leading up to the NFL draft, and then Najee Harris was my pick. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. We still got a long ways to go. We got a combine. We're going to figure out the pecking order of some of these young men. Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, Sam Howell, Malik Willis. There's a whole bunch, Desmond Ridder. There's going to be guys all over the board. How many go before the Steelers pick at 20? That's going to be interesting. We could look at draft order and try and figure that out because, there's teams that already have their quarterback that have multiple picks before the Steelers do, such as, well, if you're considering the Eagles have their quarterback, there's a little smoke there with Jalen Hurts, right? Philly fans, of course. Anyways, but the Jets, they have their guy. Jacksonville has their guy. But do the Texans have their guy? Will the Giants move on from Daniel Jones? They were changing coaches, changing general managers. A lot of those type of things are going on. And you still got Atlanta and another team like Denver that I will strongly compare to maybe the Steelers situation because a lot of people are like, hey, Aaron Rodgers comes to Pittsburgh. Boom, let's do it. 2-3 years. Maybe that's all he's got. but might be able, playing on at an MVP level, if he becomes available. He's still under contract to the Green Bay Packers. Now, I'm not entirely certain whether he has an out with them, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but you bring an MVP on like that, it's a lot like when the Broncos brought on Peyton Manning to get into two Super Bowls, high-powered offense for that one season, and the defense is what kind of drug Peyton Manning across the finish line that final year he was there. But they get a Super Bowl win, and then it's a decade of looking for another quarterback. And they've gone every avenue as well. They've gone draft, Drew Lock, Paxton Lynch, both first round. They had Brock Osweiler, who was maybe going to be the guy there behind Peyton, and he leaves, and he doesn't end up being a guy anywhere, bounces around the league. Huge contract originally with the Texans. He does come back, still doesn't really surface there as the main option. They went with Joe Flacco. They went with Teddy Bridgewater. They've had some fly-by-nights like Case Keenum or Trevor Siemian. They have tried just about everything there, and that could be very well what the Steelers are going to be looking at. Some seasons where you're at 6-7 wins and playing the quarterback lottery all the time. And I look at this and I say to myself, number one, you know what? There's some lines of thought with this. And until we get to this combine that's coming up here, we don't know the necessary pecking order. We don't have an idea of the mocks. So we don't know who will land in Pittsburgh. But I think even if someone does land, first-year quarterbacks, I'm not even going to say rookies because Aaron Rodgers struggled. He was like 4 years or so waiting to take over for Brett Favre, and he didn't have necessarily the best first season in the NFL. He wasn't Aaron Rodgers yet. Peyton Manning wasn't Peyton Manning yet. You get some guys who season a little bit, simmer, red shirt, like Patrick Mahomes sitting behind Alex Smith, and then they come out and they're wildfire. And I think that's probably maybe the way to do it, but can the Steelers afford to do that? Do they draft a guy to sit on the bench, don't improve the line, maybe either line right away, where you can maybe give the benefit of the doubt to a Mason Rudolph or a Dwayne Haskins, whichever one works. I think Rudolph's got the edge, having been there the longest. Haskins has the pedigree. But let's not forget, Rudolph, 6th quarterback taken in 2018 draft. There was 5 taken in the first round, so he's the first one outside the first round. A lot of people had him mocked in the first round. Supposedly Steelers had a first-round grade on him. This is the stuff that everyone's talking about right now. Well, if Desmond Ridder or Willis or whatever, if they fall into, the second or third round, then this is the guy you want to pick up, and then they could be your franchise quarterback. But I'm like, why not Rudolph? They just did that, and then they developed. They did everything that everyone else talks about here. But you're willing to look past them for some of these other names I'm going to bring up. And free agents, because I still don't know how this draft is going to pan out necessarily. And free agency will give us an idea of where the Steelers might be headed. We'll see if they end up adding some type of veteran quarterback, perhaps. I don't know. Got to be a pretty significant upgrade. I know some people are just like, man, Mason Rudolph, he sucks. Dwayne Haskins, he sucks. Well, Dwayne was a former first-round pick too, so some of the arguments that are here are like, well, they should really take a look at Marcus Mariota. He's mobile and all this and that. Now, Dwayne isn't the most mobile guy. He's a pocket passer. Even coming from Ohio State, he wasn't J.T. Barrett. He wasn't Justin Fields. More of a pocket guy, who I really liked a lot more than J.T. Barrett in some of those circumstances. But college game's a lot different than the pros, too. And so you've got a guy who was a former first-round pick, 17th overall? 15th overall, 2019 by the Washington football team. And he's a reclamation project in much the same way that other people feel are the other reclamation projects. So you've got two guys that have some starting experience. Rudolph's been in 17 games. He has 10 official starts. He's completed 61.5% of his passes for 2,366 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. He's been sacked 16 times on 384 pass attempts. Haskins has appeared in 16 games, just shy over 60% completion, 60.1. He has thrown for more yards, but he's also had more attempts than Mason Rudolph, 2,804 yards, so about 450 more. Fewer touchdowns, 12. More interceptions with 14, and actually 14 interceptions and 12 touchdowns. Has thrown more picks. He's been sacked 49 times on those 444 pass attempts. That's probably the most concerning thing, is if he's seeing ghosts, turning over the ball, getting sacked. People are going to tell you Well, Joe, he played for Washington football team, Redskins, whatever they are at the time, but he still has, like Logan Thomas or the one tight end, Scary Terry McLaurin. They've got players. They've had running backs that are there. They have some decent offensive linemen, maybe just as good or better than what the Steelers had. And you look at what Mason Rudolph was working with in 2019. It's going to be part of my argument going forward with this. But again, I'll have to bring up there's like Dante Moncrief, Johnny Holton, Deion Kane, Tevin Jones, running backs. When Connor goes down and Juju was hurt half the season, Deontay Johnson gets hurt. I mean, he had maybe James Washington to throw to, but then you're handing the ball off to Benny Snell and Trey Edmonds and Tony Brooks-James and Kareth White. It was a brutal season. You can still, everyone has the criticism. Randy Fichtner as the offensive coordinator. So with that, or an aging offensive line and not a good run game and all these other things, it's all the same stuff that applied there for that 2019 season. So both of these guys are kind of guys who it's like, did they really get to show you their goods and what they got? And what's so bad if you move forward with, let's say, Rudolph. Then he doesn't do good, and you bench him after 4 games, 6 games. Then you see what Haskins has. Then he doesn't have the goods. Then the Steelers, probably Mike Tomlin suffers his first losing season, perhaps. I don't know. They've still got pretty close with all those names that I mentioned. Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges, starting 0-3 too, with a game and a half of Ben Roethlisberger. Don't forget, New England Patriots on the road. Hated that game, really. And that was really the Dante Moncrief Butterfingers game, wasn't it? That's the one that really makes it stand out. But you remember that when it was Ben, and you forget about it when it was Mason Rudolph, and the guy gets cut. Not Rudolph, but Dante Moncrief gets cut before the trade deadline. So it works into the compensatory pick and free agent formulas there to get some extra picks. But Mike Tomlin still had that team in playoff contention. The Duck, cool nickname, Cinderella story and all. Liked him, 1AA guy. Saw him play in college. Air raid offense, etc. Smaller guy, slower guy. Teams found out he couldn't throw across the middle. 6 picks in the last 3 games. They tried to put Rudolph back into that equation. Breaks his collarbone. Just a whole lot of bad luck. Gets knocked out by Earl Thomas. Gets into the altercation with Myles Garrett on a short week. This is the game that everybody remembers up in Cleveland, Thursday Night Football. 4 interceptions. Deontay Johnson bleeding out of his ear. Juju and Connor both were banged up and then trying to get back on the field for that game and then get hurt in that game. They do play and then they get hurt, and it just sustains more problems that snowball. And Rudolph, obviously, strung together 3 wins when he came back after the concussion, but he was seeing some ghosts too. But people still think he sees that. They still think he's like the guy who had no supporting cast around him when he went and played the wild card, or not the wild card game, but the Week 17 game against the Browns, which they could have eliminated the Browns from the wild card, and they sat like 8 or 10 starters in that game, and he threw for over 300 yards. He's the only guy since Ben Roethlisberger, behind Ben Roethlisberger. There was no Michael Vick or Landry Jones throwing for 300 yards. That's something you got to think about. I think he did fine against the Detroit Lions. You tend to forget Kendrick Green throws a ball almost over his head, and a lot of bad snaps in that game. Bad weather in that game. Lions on the bye week. Pat Freiermuth fumbles. Deontay Johnson fumbles. But we blame Mason Rudolph for that, for a tie. Didn't even lose. But since you didn't beat the winless team, you suck. I get some of it, but man, was it a struggle. I think the guy found out when I did. Mason Rudolph finds out he's the starter at 8 o'clock on Saturday night. I'm sitting at a fine craft brewery in the Pittsburgh area as my phone blows up to everyone. And all I could think about is, man, go out there, kid, and show them what you got and do this. And I wish he would have won, and maybe it changes some opinions. And because it was a tie, it doesn't, the way the game ends up working out. But, man, you can't place that on him. And then people will want to fire Matt Canada, too. It's the same thing as Randy Fichtner, Dink and Dunk. Do you remember all these things? So you got to hope that they could overcome that in 22, obviously, because if it's all of the same problems, you don't expect there to be much more with the quarterbacks. But a guy with a first-round grade and an actual guy that was a first-rounder, if you find out one of these 2 guys can actually do it, then you don't have to spend a pick on a quarterback or that's going to sit on the bench for a year and not help your quarterbacks or even that future quarterback. Maybe you get a tackle. Maybe you get the center from Iowa. It was my early favorite. So just some food for thought. And I'm not saying necessarily either of these guys are going to have the success of Ben Roethlisberger. They could be adequate. There's more than enough adequate quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, I said, you look at Rudolph's draft, 5 guys taken in the first round. He might be the 4th or 5th best quarterback in that class already. Josh Rosen is probably the worst out of that for the first rounders that were taken. And then you take a look at Sam Darnold. I wouldn't necessarily crown him king yet either. And the other 3, of course, Josh Allen, he's the head of the class so far. You got Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson's won an MVP. Lamar Jackson's a completely different beast that I don't like to talk about because he gets you wins in different ways. A lot of people want that type of prototype and type of quarterback. I still think that type of offense is limited or short-term, or you have to have the exact ingredients in order to cook in that kitchen, so to speak. You just can't throw Lamar Jackson in behind that offensive line that the Steelers had to be running for his life all the time. So those are my comments on those 2 guys. And obviously, if Rudolph doesn't end up being the guy, maybe Dwayne Haskins just was in a bad situation in Washington. But at least this is his 2nd team and not like his 3rd or 4th team or 5th team. Because how many more times are you going to recycle the quarterbacks and expect a different result from all of these guys? And that's kind of where I want to go with the remainder of this program. The reason I give you a lot of the background on Rudolph and Haskins is to ask the question, is this insert name truly an upgrade over Rudolph and Haskins? And with that, you have to consider what this quarterback is going to cost you. If they're a free agent, it's only going to be financial. If they're with another team, a la Aaron Rodgers, is it going to cost you draft picks, draft capital that the Steelers really don't even have this year? Are you going to mortgage the future, and how much of it are you going to mortgage where you potentially improve the quarterback position, and then you can't really do anything with everything else, especially with high-dollar price tag guys like Aaron Rodgers and one of my favorite non-Steeler right now, Russell Wilson, if he were to become available, but they're under contract right now. So let's talk about the guys that are already under contract. Again, not thinking about rookies. We've got free agency that happens first, and then the combine is going to show us the pecking order. Any of these trades that you think might happen with some of these quarterbacks? Aaron Rodgers is the elephant in the room here. This stuff is going to happen before the draft. I think it has to happen before the draft. And most certainly, in some cases, the teams need to get some of this money off the books, or they have to have their quarterback in place, so then they have their draft plan in place. You don't want to be making a trade for Aaron Rodgers and then drafting somebody as well. I don't think you wouldn't probably have a first round. I don't know. Maybe you would have a first round pick. I mean, look at Antonio Brown, the final year of his contract, wide receiver, up there in age. I mean, Rodgers is 38. He's going to be going on 39. Still playing at a very high MVP level, but 1 year left on his contract. Like I said, I'm not sure if he has the option here to opt out of this contract. He did have things redone as he sat out and pouted all off season. He is a diva, as somebody else said, but that would be our diva. Yeah, I agree with that. I could take that. Then I changed sides. You know how that works? That was like when James Harrison stabbed us in the back, then came back, and it was like open arms. I'll hug you. I'll embrace you. Antonio's got a lot of work to do yet, but still a guy I really loved as a player. But, you know, he demanded his trade. The Steelers still had to pay money, dead money on the books. They got a third and maybe a fifth, third and fifth from the Raiders for that trade. So things like that happen. It might not have to be first-round picks. There's other names that are going to pop up on here that are going to require a lot more capital. And it's because of the amount of contract time that's left, how much money that team has invested in the player, the player's age, etc. It's like a supply and demand thing. So Aaron Rodgers, technically a 2023 free agent. Some of you are going to go look at stuff like overthecap.com is a great resource when you're looking at any type. It's what I use because I'm not a salary cap expert by any means. So you can go there. You can maybe even follow along. You look at the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, obviously Mahomes, Josh Allen with those, and Dak Prescott with all those contracts that were just signed. And then there's Deshaun Watson that's on here. But Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, these guys are among the top paid too, and as was Ben Roethlisberger this past season. But there's some guys here. So let's take a look at Aaron Rodgers, for example. He said he doesn't want to be part of a rebuild. So does that mean he's out of Pittsburgh? Or did Pittsburgh just rebuild? Because there might not be a whole lot that they have to add. And talk about a free agent, they're going to bring this guy in. They're going to tell him what their plans are in order to sell him on the job, right? Hey, we're going to draft a center, or we're targeting to sign this center or this center in free agency, which I haven't looked at the free agent centers whatsoever to see what's there, or a tackle, and the offensive line's all here. And guess what? We got Deontay Johnson, and we got Chase Claypool, and Najee Harris, and Pat Freiermuth, and you're going to get all excited, and it's going to be like, yeah, this is way better than throwing the like Mercedes Lewis, who's been playing in the NFL for 24 years. He targets once. Besides, did he target anyone outside of like Devontae Adams in that game the other day? I mean, it's just, woo. Anyways. Rodgers was the third highest paid quarterback by contract in 2021. He's due $46 million by the Packers in 2022, but it doesn't mean that his new team is going to owe him $46 million because there is dead cap. Dun, dun, dun. So what does that mean? You can take a look at over the cap. You take a look at some of these quarterback contracts. You pull up Aaron Rodgers, who, by the way, also wears number 12, which is unofficially retired. Hasn't been reissued since Terry Bradshaw retired from the Steelers. So that's interesting. Would he wear 12 if he came to Pittsburgh? Well, we got to see if he actually comes first. But his base salary, $26.4 million. That would be, believe it or not, 26.8 is actually what his dead money is that the Packers would still be paying. His new team would be paying about 19.8 to have him for 1 year. But the Packers also owe him another 7.6 going forward too, on a void year for 2023. So you take a look at that, and you're wondering to yourself, will the Green Bay Packers eat? Was that about $34 million over 2 seasons? It's a very interesting take. What would it get for them to part? And they might part with him just to get something, knowing that he's not going to come back. It's the Antonio Brown situation. People really thought that they were going to get a first-round pick for Antonio Brown. I don't know if that was going to happen. I forget what the Buffalo Bills had on deck for him. Maybe they did. Green Bay, though, the reason why this has legs isn't all because of the grandstanding of Rodgers and his flirtations with Mike Tomlin around that Week 4 game that was played up in Green Bay between the Steelers and Packers. It's because Green Bay is in salary cap hell. And they are next to last with the worst cap situation heading into this offseason. They're at over $40 million on an early estimated $208 million salary cap as estimated by overthecap.com. So they're going to have to make some big moves, and they could cut about half of that if they move on this high dollar price tag of Aaron Rodgers. They've already drafted Jordan Love as potentially their future there. I'm not sure how that might turn out. Looked a little rough when we did get to see him, but I don't know. Buckle up, because I think it's going to be a sweepstakes for Rodgers. I know a lot of people, I already mentioned the Denver Broncos have been searching for a long time, and they got an exciting situation there too. They've already got the young offensive line in place. They got guys like Cortland Sutton and I was gonna say KJ Hamler, and I'm trying to think of the other guy, and Noah Fant's one of the tight ends. So they've got a stable of young skill position players. Javonte Williams is a beast too at running back. So I don't know, it could be a good fit. And then their defense, they're still working on that, but their defense wasn't all too shabby aside from some injuries as well last year. My favorite guy is Russell Wilson, but he's not a free agent until 2024. He's turning 34 in November, so he's a guy that still clearly has a lot of football left in him. He kind of reminds me of the Matt Stafford situation, albeit I think the Lions, I think they still had a couple years on him as well. I loved the move that the LA Rams made for Stafford. You see they get to the conference championship game with him. Roughly about the same age, thrown for a boatload of yards. Stafford's never been in an MVP conversation because he played in Detroit, so I think he was always overlooked and undervalued, except for the money that he was paid. Russell Wilson has a very handsome contract. We'll see what happens with head coach Pete Carroll. He turned 71 this year. How much longer does Pete stay in the Pacific Northwest up there and coach? I'm not exactly sure what happens there. And of course, if it's a new coach, new general manager, will they continue on with Russell Wilson? He's been vocal. He's had bad offensive lines, etc. I just don't see it happening. I don't see him being available. Like, I could see Aaron Rodgers being available. Packers are just like, screw this guy. We got to do something with this, and they're in a bad salary cap situation. The Seahawks are in a similar situation. They got $40 million in dead cap, and I think that's going to make it what I like to call a king's ransom. The cap number on Russell Wilson was the highest in the NFL this year at $32 million, just $1 million above Kirk Cousins, who will show up on this list shortly. Yep, $26 million dead cap 2022, 13 in dead cap, but they get to save 11 and then $27 million and flips around. A little bit of savings, more likely to happen the following year. Seahawks don't really value draft picks to begin with. So I don't know if they give up a franchise quarterback for picks. Will be interesting. Let's see who's next on my list. Oh, Jimmy Garoppolo. Hello there. Oh boy. The people that are saying, well, I'd really like to see him in a Steelers jersey. I still don't know the fascination from when this guy came over from the New England Patriots, having attempted like 100 passes in his career, and they're just in love with Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't get it. I seriously don't get it. He's in New England. He attempted 94 passes. Yeah, he had a high completion percentage. He's had a high completion percentage in San Francisco too. He threw for 5 touchdowns. He appeared in 17 games with New England, only 2 starts in 3 years. He's Tom Brady's backup. We've seen that fascination before with like Ryan Mallett and some others, and it doesn't always pan out. Matt Castle, semi-decent career following New England. Here's my problem with Jimmy G. He goes there in San Francisco. He lands, what is it, a 5 years on $135 million contract, 137 and a half, a little bit more. The extra $2.5 million, not really, not chump change for me or you, right? When you're talking about that, just a little bit. Let's bump a little bit. Let's find some stuff in the sofa. So Garoppolo's played 1 full season. He's missed 10, 13, 10. And then 2 games this year as well. In 4 of his last 5 years over there in San Francisco, he has never thrown for 4,000 yards in a season. His season high is 27 touchdown passes. And at best, he's a guy that's like 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. His first season, 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 5-3, 27-13, almost half interceptions, 7-5, 20-12. This past season. His postseason games, they just win in spite of him. So everybody's saying like, hey, he's going to the NFC Championship game. Why would they get rid of him? They just invested a boatload of capital in their future into Trey Lance. They've redshirted Trey Lance for a year. Maybe they're thinking they can get some of that draft capital back by shipping Jimmy Garoppolo off. And Garoppolo is yet another guy who's not a free agent for yet another year. He does come with a pretty low contract here. $1.4 million is all the dead money San Francisco has to eat. They will save $25.5 million by if they just cut him. Now, I'm sure they're not just going to cut him, but when push comes to shove and you're looking in the face of that salary cap number and savings, and you have a young guy on your bench that you invested a lot into, they're going to try and get some of that investment back, but they don't necessarily have to. The base salary for Jimmy G comes in at $24 million, just a little over. This isn't the kind of money. I guess 24 is cheap. He's going to be seeking 30 or more. The way these contracts are going, he's not a guy I want to pay 30 or more for. These playoff games, 11 of 19, 57% completion, 131 yards, a touchdown, and a pick, 74.7 rating. He's been sacked 8 times in 5 playoff games, by the way. He's been picked off 5 times. Almost 1 per game. He went 6 of 8 against Green Bay for 77 yards in that meeting last year, where they beat the Packers. And then, I'm sorry, yeah, the year before that. I apologize. The date on here is 2020, 2019 season. So, anyways, let's see. And then against the Chiefs, 20 of 31, 219 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks. This season, Cowboys 16-25. It's like they don't want to let him throw too much. 64 completed, but percentage of his passes completed 64%, but 172 yards and a pick. He hasn't thrown a touchdown all postseason yet. He's 11-19, 57.8 completed, 131 yards, no touchdowns and a pick. And he got sacked 4 times against the Packers. His quarterback ratings in these 5 postseason games: 74-7, 104-7. That was the 6 of 8 for 75 yards. 69.2, nice. 67.4 and 57.1. Career 70.3 not completion percentage, but quarterback rating. And people think that this is maybe an upgrade over Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins. The guy is going to get in the playoffs, and you're still going to complain that Mike Tomlin can't win a playoff game because the quarterback he's not holding up his end of the bargain. Regular season wise, he's 98.3, but he still doesn't play full seasons. So if you bring him in and pay him a boatload of money, the chances of you still seeing Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins is very high. So why are you going to offload draft picks and pay this guy money to have him maybe not play half a year? And that is my TED Talk on Jimmy Garoppolo. Done. Goodbye. Not thinking about it. Not interested. That's a strong pass. Kirk Cousins was extended $96 million over 3 years. He's not a free agent until next year either. His name comes up way too often. I don't think the Vikings are going to move from him. And I think much of their open positions, like with their head coach, lies on having a stable quarterback. He actually hasn't been bad in Minnesota. Minnesota's been bad all around him because I think his contract, like Joe Flacco years ago, cripples that team's ability to add other pieces. It's almost all got to be through the draft or some really frugal moves. Derek Carr comes up a lot too, and it's the same exact thing I'm going to say about Cousins. This one isn't necessarily money yet. It will come to money because everybody's contract, the next one is the next biggest one. And I don't think the Raiders go anywhere with this either. If you're trying to bring in and attract a new head coach, he's still not a free agent for another year either. So he's not really available. These are guys that are got to be cut or acquired in a trade. And still, the only one that really appears, it looks like Garoppolo could get released for cap savings or get traded so they could get that cap savings as well and recoup some picks. And, of course, Aaron Rodgers, just because Aaron's been a diva and he says he's out. Baker Mayfield, I'm not interested in it. The Cleveland Browns are not trading within their own division, especially the former number 1 overall pick. And they're going to try and ride this pony, at least for a 5th-year option, one more year before deciding what to do with him, based on him being injured last year. Kind of erratic and inconsistent. Great offensive line. Put lots of weapons around him like Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, who we'll see if he ends up coming back, man. I can't imagine that. What a fantastic player he is. Austin Hooper, a big free agent tight end that they added to that team. It's a very interesting. This one's going to be talked about a lot in the Cleveland media. You'll see it in national media. Is Baker Mayfield going to be the guy? If he's not the guy there, he's not going to be the guy in Pittsburgh either. I'm sorry to say it, especially if Matt Canada is going to require him to throw the ball 50 times like he did with Mason Rudolph in that Lions game, albeit overtime padded that a little bit. Gardner Minshew. Yes, that one makes me a little ill. It reminds me of Ryan Fitzpatrick, who is available. Oh, please. No Fitzmagic. The Eagles traded for this guy. He's not a free agent until next year. They traded for him because I don't think they trust Jalen Hurts. Why are they going to get rid of him? I think there's a fascination with when you see Gardner Minshew, just like Fitzmagic, have good games, then they go out there and stink out the joint. And it's going to be up and down, peaks and valleys. Are the peaks worth the valleys as well? Not in my opinion. I'm not a fan at all. Got a cool gimmick going for him. He's got the porn stash and everything else, but he's a fun guy. I don't know. I really don't. The Eagles looked like maybe a little bit of a different team with him out there. And if you truly believe that, then maybe they believe it, and he's not going anywhere. He won't be available. Nick Foles. How many teams has this guy been on? 33-year-old quarterback, former Super Bowl MVP. Got to scoop him up. Can't play ahead of Andy Dalton. They weren't going to play him ahead of Justin Fields, I don't think. They could have. Maybe they should have sat Fields for a full year, but I think Matt Nagy was trying to save his job too. So he's been a viable starter in spotty situations, but man, is he just inconsistent. Just like what I was just saying previous. And you've got more of this on paper of inconsistency than you do maybe like Gardner Minshew, where you can maybe say Minshew would be an option. But again, Nick Foles, he could be cut. I don't know what his contract is. I don't think it's very much, to be honest, especially for how far back. Let's see. It was a cap hit of 6.6 this season, and he's a cap number of 10. He's going to only save them $3 million in Chicago next year, whereas they would lose 7.6. Unless the new regime is just going to clean house. I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon. Oh, my goodness. My favorite. My final of the not available. But this guy is going to be available. Via trade, probably. Deshaun Watson. Houston Texans did not play this year. Signed a huge contract before they found out they weren't going to play him. Wow. Where do I even begin with this? So in 2020, he signed a 4-year extension to his rookie deal. That means he's not going to be a free agent until 2026. That deal was worth $156 million in new money. 73.7 of that fully guaranteed. That means Watson has a dead cap this upcoming 2022 season of $51.2 million alone. And then he has $16.2 million in dead cap going forward. Let's see. Bring up Watson's numbers here too, which are just sick. And then he has no dead cap in 2025. So actually, I have my numbers a little. Oh, yeah, it's 16 total. 10.8 and 5.4 in the following years. That 51.2. You take that in there with the 61. You're almost like 65. I'm doing quick math. 65 million, something of that nature. 67 million, and money that you're going to eat. What will it take to? Who's the sucker that's going to take this guy? That's what I want to know. He sat out this year. Is Roger Goodell just going to say whenever these legal off-field issues resolve that, it's okay. You can play now. You did enough of penance. I don't know. I think he gets formally suspended. They slap I would say slap his wrist. That sounds very light. But he could be sitting out a full season still on top of that. So here you go. You're going to trade 3 first-round picks. Bring on this huge, huge contract of which you're going to still owe this guy $35 million on just the base salary next year. His base salary is 20, 32, and 32. I think it more comes in line with the early 30s as opposed to whatever happens with this 2022 figure, which over the cap is actually showing the cap savings is not a cap savings. It's an additional loss of another 10 million. So they might be losing 60 million here. If I'm reading this correctly, I don't profess to know the cap, but just to get some of the figures as they're showing here, that's a boatload of money. And you're going to trade three first-round picks, so your whole future of your team. So when this guy's contract's up again, if he plays, if he doesn't play, you're the Steelers, and you make this move, and now you're without your draft for the next several years. Now you're without most of your salary cap because you're paying 30-some million over each season, over the next few seasons. And then the guy gets suspended, and you're stuck with Rudolph or Haskins anyway. That's a Homer Simpson that I can't rationalize with this until we know what this guy's legal problems may or may not be. And to be completely honest, if that gets ironed out, maybe the Texans just roll with them. You're paying them enough money. You've been paying them enough money. So, again, out of all of these, I know the smoke and fire of Aaron Rodgers, it's kind of appealing. People are going to say, oh, and I don't know, did I bring this up? I'm going to say repeat it again just in case I didn't. Bridge quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is not a bridge quarterback. You're thinking of bridge in terms of time period. Okay? If you go and you sign one of these now there's guys that are available, which I'll mention, like Teddy Bridgewater. That could be a bridge. That's not the bridge I want to travel. to be completely honest. How many teams do you need to see Teddy Bridgewater play for before you realize he's not the answer anywhere? I'm not saying he's necessarily a terrible quarterback. I think he's okay in Denver, was not good with Carolina, was adequate in spot duty with the Saints. But look at what the Saints had. They were building that team to go all in with Drew Brees. And you could put in Taysom Hill, and they were still doing okay. Jameis Winston proved that point also this past season. And I think Jameis may actually be available also. To be completely honest, it's not a guy I'm particularly thrilled to throw a name out. Is he really an upgrade? He's a former first-round pick. Is he really an upgrade, though? Let's take a look at what Jameis did. 7 games, 14 TDs to 3 interceptions. He kept all that down. I guess the LASIK eye surgery ended up working for him. And, of course, he sat a year in the system with New Orleans. So let's see if I can find out. Jameis was not the guy. One guy I missed on my list here. Oh, he has void contracts, void years. That's why. So he had void years. So he would have to have this reworked, but the contract is void for salary cap purposes because the Saints were in a worse situation than the Steelers were this past offseason, and they are in the worst way for this year as well. They might not be able to keep Jameis Winston, or I don't know what some of the other contracts are that they'll have to cut or finagle their way out of. But Winston, though, I mean, I really don't know. I was really against him coming off of Tampa and his 33 touchdowns, the 30 interceptions. You saw Tom Brady go in, and then that team completely turned upside down. Everyone wants to say Bruce Arians is the quarterback whisperer. I think he's the quarterback killer. He's killed Carson Palmer. He damn near killed Ben Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh, killed Andrew Luck in Indy. It's just all these guys are getting murdered now. But Brady wasn't getting necessarily tattooed as much, but Winston was. He took 47 sacks in 16 games in 2019, threw for over 5,000 yards. He's still been about 60-some% completion. I wouldn't necessarily call him the most mobile quarterback, maybe, just like I would say with Haskins. A few hundred yards here or there. His first year in Tampa, he ran a lot more. Probably coming off the college game, being a little indecisive with where he wants to put the football. So sometimes these guys trust their legs more often. You might twist my arm into this, but is he an upgrade? And do you get him for the same kind of money? Did he play himself into something a little better than the 2.5 cap number? I mean, he was a 1-year contract for $5.5 million, which the Steelers couldn't afford this past offseason. Is he an upgrade? He is a veteran. He has lots of starting experience. This is the one of the maybes I could throw out there. It's a maybe. Maybe they sniff around. I'm going to tell you, I don't want to sniff around Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think the Steelers will be his 10th or 11th team in the NFL. Guy's like 37 years old, erratic, fun to watch like Minshew. Keep him at a distance. Let him do something with another team if he plays any more professional football going forward. Cam Newton, we've already seen this story, how that's come full circle. Couldn't really get anything done with Bill Belichick. That offense goes back to Carolina and not much there. Tyrod Taylor, interesting name because he's a mobile quarterback. He's a guy who seems to be always in someone else's bad situation. He's truly been a bridge quarterback at Cleveland and with the Chargers. And I don't know if he was really bridging for Davis Mills in Houston, but he's just had the worst luck getting hurt, and it's always like freak accident type stuff, so I'm not going to necessarily hold that against him. But Tyrod Taylor, that's an interesting name that's coming up this offseason. I'm going to verify what Tyrod was making and where his contract lies too. He had, let me see, a $5.5 million contract for 1 year. His numbers kind of interesting for a guy that entered the NFL where he did in the 6th round and been bouncing around originally with Baltimore. And then with Buffalo, he didn't have necessarily the best numbers. Cleveland, obviously, not good numbers. Didn't play a whole lot of games, but his completion percentage isn't up there. His turnovers, so-so. He's a guy that's more running around with his legs. Is somebody I would more prefer to be a backup than a starter in this type of conversation here. Jacoby Brissett, same area. I'm not really interested in whatever Jacoby has to offer. I understand that, he's another guy that's seasoned and been around. But again, how many times are you going to recycle the same type of player? 1 year contract that was $5 million. So you're looking at about what he would cost to bring in, and he gets a little bit. It is 60.2 lifetime completion percentage. He hasn't really, he had a little bit of playing time with the Miami Dolphins this past season, 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. I don't know. When he was with the Colts, 18-6, but again, yards per attempt and things of that nature, not high up there. I don't know he's the guy that wills your team to victory. Marcus Mariota. Here's another one that just boils me to no end when we bring up his name. And when I bring up his name, if it comes up, rookie season, misses 4 games, misses a game each in the next 2 seasons, misses 2. Again, goes to his 5th year with the Titans, gets benched for Ryan Tannehill. And that final year, he was completing fewer than 60% of his passes, 7 touchdowns to 2 interceptions in 7 games. So not necessarily the looking super sharp with the Raiders. He's been mostly a gimmick player. He comes in, they try and do almost like a wildcat, but with a quarterback. He's only thrown 1 touchdown in each of the last 2 years. 28 years old, former first-round pick. Does he have the shadows he's afraid of, the ghosts that are chasing him, like many people felt with Rudolph? Is he really an improvement on Rudolph or Haskins? A lot of people are going to say yes. Took a lot of sacks. That final year as a starter in Tennessee, 42 sacks. It's one of the reasons why he was maybe banged up. He clearly wasn't the answer for Tennessee. They went out and got Tannehill, and you look at what, all considering the choke, but Tennessee's been the playoff contender, et cetera, et cetera. So it kind of makes you wonder. He's again, another guy that trusts his legs a lot, has some rushing yards there, fits the mobile and veteran aspect. Mitch Trubisky, there's another guy. I don't know what to think of Mitch Trubisky. He's sitting behind Josh Allen now in Buffalo. 4 years in Chicago, 64 completion percentage, 64 touchdowns to 37 interceptions. Excuse me. Maybe not the best numbers. Kind of a guy that I think they waffled on a little bit is some of that Matt Nagy's problem. He's had guys like Allen Robinson. He's had decent running backs in the backfield. I know Chicago wasn't necessarily the shining example of how to operate a franchise. Just kind of makes me wonder. And the other thing that kind of makes me wonder on this too is in such a quarterback needy NFL, a guy like Mitchell Trubisky couldn't go anywhere else other than to be a backup behind Buffalo for a 1 year, $2.5 million contract. Now, this is where I am with Mariota, Trubisky. I got a couple others. Mike Glennon. He's on the free agent list, but I thought I'd have to do that. Is there some realized gain or upgrade having one of these guys compete in camp? I've heard a lot of arguments about, and this applies to Rudolph, but last year it was well, why don't they put Haskins with the ones, or most of the starters? It's not like Rudolph played with all starters in the preseason either. It's preseason football. It's generic. There's still guys that didn't make the team he was throwing the ball to. Haskins was mostly taking the reps as the QB2, and except for Ben and his dress rehearsal, where he looked very sharp. Perfect quarterback rating, don't forget. Tearing it up when it's the preseason. But that was one of the comments is Josh Dobbs. I have not mentioned Josh Dobbs at all because he did not make the team this season. He did not make the 53, so he was placed on injured reserve. You see him on the sidelines. I don't know if they're trying to coach him up or they're trying to kind of protect him. I mean, he could have been waived with injury settlement and then picked up by another team. It does concern me that Jacksonville is, a black hole of lack of talent, and he couldn't see any playing time when he went down there in a trade a couple years ago. Smart guy. I think he's a guy that's mostly his legs, strong arm, but not accurate. I don't think he's in this conversation at all. That's why I don't bring him up. I probably won't bring him up very often. I don't know. Did they bring him back as a QB4, QB3? Who does he play with? How does he really show his wares? Are you benching? Are you going to indefinitely bench Rudolph, bring Haskins in? He's no good. And then you're going to go to Dobbs? I think you go back to Rudolph before you bring Dobbs in. Is just my case in point here. If you add a Mariota or a Mitch Trubisky to this, who becomes the new Dobbs? Is it one of those two guys that you just paid money for? Or is it Rudolph or is it Haskins? You know, some big decisions coming. I don't necessarily know 100% that the free agent market is where the Steelers are going to go. It's going to be interesting to see the teams that still have quarterback needs. They might take a stab on one of these guys and then bring in somebody else. They draft somebody else. That's kind of, I don't know. It's intriguing to me. It's like, would the New York Giants make a move for somebody like Marcus Mariota or Mitchell Trubisky and then play them over the guy they drafted like Daniel Jones, much in the same way the Titans did Ryan Tannehill to Mariota in the first place. So I'm not going to necessarily dump on, Trubisky's completely toast. But we've seen guys like Tim Couch and David Carr get completely ruined by playing behind bad teams, bad offensive lines particularly, and they never grow out of that. I don't think that was necessarily Rudolph. Necessarily, I don't know that that's Haskins either. I think Haskins may be too raw, come getting started out of college too early there, thrown right into the fire. Washington's not exactly the stable situation either. Maybe the Steelers are a more stable situation. I don't know where you go with this. The Steelers have some cap space. They're going to be, I won't say they're going to be among the tops in the league, but they're certainly in the top 10. Right now, over the cap has them with an estimated base salary cap they believe might be $208 million. Steelers would have 34.4. I don't know that includes the money that they've already rolled over. I think they had about $8 or $9 million they didn't spend. They usually keep a little pocket change to maybe sign free agents if there's injuries within the season. And typically, that's maybe $4 or $5 million. Maybe they move on from somebody, as I mentioned in the last episode, like Zach Banner, save another $5 million, make some plays towards some free agents. But are you investing in quarterback when you have some other needs? And we're going to talk about some of those needs. We're going to talk about the Steelers' impending free agent class here and who might be back and who you could live without in one of our upcoming episodes, hopefully with my boy Brian. So I hope you enjoyed this. I know this one's going to have a little bit of a fervor. I got to close out with this. If you could improve, definite upgrades at the quarterback position for me. Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. That conversation ends there because although I like Deshaun Watson when he's playing, there's too much else going on with his situation from contract to the off-field legal stuff for me to want to take a stab. And I don't think the Steelers organization is the team that would take that stab. Derek Carr, I think Derek Carr's career starts out, he's basically Mason Rudolph. He's a second-round pick. Never know. Could have the same guy already in the building. So I'm not making trades towards some of these guys. You take a stab at a Jameis Winston or Mitchell Trubisky or Marcus Mariota, or does some other team take a stab, or do the teams he's with? Don't let him leave the building. Oh, Buffalo, with all the money he just invested in Josh Allen, and you got to have a backup quarterback, but that's how Colt McCoy stuck around for so many years, and he's behind Kyler Murray in Arizona. Cheap, taking a lower contract, but has some starting experience in the NFL, but isn't necessarily the guy that you want to see every Sunday. I have my apprehensions about definite upgrade or guy that could battle. If you didn't have Haskins and it was just Rudolph, then I'm absolutely pushing for a Mariota or a Trubisky to be there, because why not? But you're adding too many cooks to the kitchen. You're going to add a lot of controversy. You're going to take reps from each of these guys. And I don't think that helps any of them succeed. Again, if the Steelers end up flopping because they roll with Rudolph and they roll with Haskins and they are terrible and they win like 4 games, they're going to be in a position to draft somebody in what should be a better quarterback class in 2023 instead of burning the pick early this year as well. So I think I still do roll and see, because then if one of these guys have it, you don't have to draft somebody in 2023. You've got your quarterback already. You can extend him, and I'm going to say that Rudolph isn't going to command $30 million unless he puts up some Aaron Rodgers numbers, and all of you just fell out of your chair wherever you are. Hopefully not on the treadmill, working out at the gym listening, and just fell off the treadmill as I say that. But you know what? Stranger things have happened. I'm not that facetious. My cousin, Brad, he's always on me. He's like, you got this love for backup quarterbacks and think that every backup... Look, the Landry Jones thing was so much in jest. I just think the guy got so much unnecessary flack when he wasn't that bad of a player, honestly. For a backup quarterback. He got in there and won games for the Steelers or kept them competitive. He had some real bad turnovers here or there because he is what he is. But geez, watching Michael Vick, 36-year-old Michael Vick, struggle to hit guys like Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant in that offense that year was just... like, of course, Andrew Jones, somebody should be able to jump in there and have some success. You have all of these weapons. You had the killer bees. Yet another thing when I talk about Mike Tomlin winning seasons, postseason, and everything else, it's like people forget you didn't always have Ben Roethlisberger. You saw guys like Byron Leftwich toward tail end of his career, struggled, had injured ribs or whatever, couldn't throw the ball like 20 yards down the field in that one game against the Ravens. And Charlie Batch played till he was about 40 years old too. And Charlie was always kind of a middle of the road type player. So, and Charlie's loved because he was a hometown guy, but his stats and his play, a lot of that's defense. It's because they got the dubs, right? And Mason Rudolph hasn't got those dubs. Nothing in the win column there that really nudges people, and a lot of people are equating him to how Duck Hodges played, how Andrew Jones played, and I just think it's kind of unfair. And I also think, too, that if Haskins was in a bad situation and you've picked this guy up for peanuts, you never know. You never know what they're going to end up being. But again, if there's a definite upgrade out there and you can make it work and everything else kind of falls in place and you're not mortgaging the future, either salary cap or draft, you're going to make that move if you're the Steelers. I make that move too. So I don't want to sound like I'm just this guy that's completely on it. It's going to happen in the draft too. If one of these quarterbacks falls because a lot of these teams that are already on the board have somebody in place already, and at pick 20, the next Aaron Rodgers is sitting there for the Steelers, you'd have to be a maniac to not pick that guy. But does that guy exist in this draft as well? It's to be determined. So, folks, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for listening. As always, got lots of more off-season topics to talk to all you about here in the near future. But until then, as always, my name's Joe Kuzma, and I always encourage our listeners out there to catch us next time and be safe, be good, and we will catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.